topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV, where we bring you educational information from top local experts in the fields of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. Now sit back and listen to experts in family law, association law, hearing loss, business brokers, home care, along with many other topics. Now here are your hosts, Steve-O and Sophia.
Good afternoon, Los Angeles. Welcome to another Ask the Expert show where we bring you the top experts in Southern California. And I got to tell you, today's show is, I understand this because about 20 years ago, I had mold in my kitchen, of all places. And why I thought it would just go away on its own doesn't work that way. So today's show is we're going to be talking about mold, and we're going to be talking from one of the biggest and best authorities, the Mold Zero Company, Raymond Almania. And I am so glad we've got him on today because you're going to learn. First of all, you better take care of this. We've got the best company in all of Southern California, but we've got questions that we've received that we're going to be asking Raymond. If you have a question, you'll see right there, we've got a chat board right up there. You can ask your questions on there. Welcome, Raymond.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
Good to see you, bro. So your company is Mold Zero Service, and I mean, first of all, what a great name. Tell people how you got started in the mold business.
Well, prior to this, my background was, in the field, not just marketing and sales, but also we were working on, duct work and stuff like that, and also a lot of some safety stuff. And then the guy who got me started on it, Rusty, who runs our Florida branch of Mold Zero, his wife got really sick with mold. And that's really initially what was the motivation to find out more about it. And then because she had such an adversity to some of the remedies to resolve mold, like the chemicals and stuff, she was very sensitive to a lot of the protocols to resolve mold. So eventually they found a company in Utah, and a guy who headed up called Mike Adams. He invented something for hospitals to clean clean rooms, to clean surgery rooms, which means it had high standards of cleaning surgery rooms, but we just transferred it over because what it would do for surgery rooms would make it really not sterilized, but more sanitized. It would kill mold spores. And we just, along with bacteria and viruses. So what we did is we just transferred it over. Well, they did actually, to residential and commercial stuff out in the public, right? Not just hospitals. So that's how we got started. It was really a solution to a problem.
What a great story. We had a phone call right after our last show, and they wanted to know, does mold form when you're on the water?
Yeah, I mean, we get calls from people who have, boats in the marina. Here's how mold forms, whether it's, what happens, it's like all it takes for mold to grow is oxygen. There's plenty of air, of course, a food source. And unfortunately, everything's a food source for mold. Walls, carpet, wood, even pet hair and dead skin. So everything is a food source for mold. Wow. The third thing is moisture, right? Now, when those three things come together, but at the right humidity, the right temperature, right humidity, mold's going to grow. It makes no difference if you're on land or on sea or if it's an old building or a new building, or if it's a dirty or a really clean. If it has, air, food source, moisture, but at the right humidity, right temperature, right humidity, mold's going to grow. Because remember, mold is part of planet Earth. You're never going to get mold to zero. And I know what the name of my company is, but you're never going to get it to mold zero. So actually, mold industry standards are the total mold levels in any one structure must be lower than the total mold levels directly outside that same structure. And I'll explain why later if anybody wants to know specifically why. But so that's what we do. We make sure it's lower than outside.
I'm sure people want to know, well, my God, how am I going to stop mold from growing in my house?
Well, as soon as you have any kind of water intrusion, any kind of impact of moisture, you need to address it and resolve it right away. Remember, these homes that we all live in, these apartments, commercial buildings, what have you, they're all meant to give us shelter and protected from the outside elements. So when you see bubbles on your wall, or you see a water intrusion or a leak, whether it's from a window, a roof, or impact air conditioner, water heaters, it shouldn't just sit there for, 48 hours. You try to address it, confront it, and resolve it right away. Because as it sits, remember, I mentioned earlier, mold comes in and out of our lives 24/7. Now, they don't always colonize, but again, I mentioned how it colonizes. Oxygen, food source, moisture at the right humidity. So if mold is traveling in and out and has those four elements happening, that equation is going to happen. It's going to start colonizing. So once you have that moisture, that's why most mold companies always have moisture meters, because they want to see how high a level it is. Once you have that moisture, don't let it hang in there for a long time, because people tell me all the time, when did this happen? It says, it happened a couple of weeks ago. How long you have this? It's been going on for days or years. Some people tell me months or years. It doesn't matter. But the point is, as soon as it happens, if you want to, because the original question was, how can I protect myself from mold? Because
right.
Yes, mold comes in and out of our lives 24/7, but it doesn't always colonize. It colonizes because of those elements. So whenever moisture hits, you got to, address it right away and resolve it right away.
Roman, what is mold have a color?
Yeah, all kinds of different colors. I've seen, there's gray, there's white, there's black, but I've also seen pretty exotic mold. There's this one area in the valley, I won't say specifically. And I want to tell this particular story because this particular home, because people always say when you're in an old home, it's problems because it's been, centuries old, 100 years old, built in 1700s. This home was brand new house. And for whatever reason, maybe the architecturally, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but I think it wasn't whatever. It wasn't designed correctly. But in the crawl space, there wasn't enough circulation, ventilation. So those are one of the three things we look for: water intrusions, if the areas are wet, and adequate ventilation. So in this crawl space, there wasn't adequate ventilation. And the upstairs, it was starting to impact upstairs. And they had an infant, a baby that was getting sick out of the blue. Long story short, when we went down in there, it looked like an aquatic sea under the water.
Oh my God.
Vegetation, all different colors. So mold comes in all different colors. There's over 100,000 species, and they divide up into different families. So this particular thing had been just sitting there. The house wasn't over a year and a half old. It was built about a year and a half ago, and they had just purchased it months ago. So brand new, beautiful, high-end house, but underneath it was just terrible. It was just like a garden of mold. Yeah.
So what do you do for a house like that?
We do a lot of the standard stuff. We do a 3-step program because most mold companies, and this is what differentiates us from other mold companies, is most mold companies, and we've did it too before, they cut out the mold. They take the mold out of the environment. That makes total sense. If you have mold someplace, let's remove it. The problem with that is a lot of the mold that's not visible, mold spores are 20 to 30 microns. That's invisible.
Wow.
Right. And it also has, one of its main characteristics is mold outside in our neighborhood, outside our homes, our apartments, our commercial buildings, mold is eating, procreating, and spreading. Eating, procreating, and spreading. So if it starts to colonize inside a house, of course, it's going to do the same thing. So it's going to eat, procreate, and spread, which means mold has a capability of spreading incredibly fast. The phrase I like to use to drive this home is mold can spread as fast as you can smell bacon throughout the house.
Wow.
Right. So what we do is, instead of trying to remove the mold out of the environment, we use a dry fog process, a 3-step process, which came from the hospitals. So people say dry fog's been around forever, and it has. But if its heritage is not from hospitals, it's not the same thing. So for the hospitals, all those processes had to be non-toxic. The hospital demanded it had to be EPA certified, FDA certified, a lot of requirements, right? So we just transferred it to residential and commercial out here. And so our 3-step is the first step of our dry fog will kill existing mold. And I'm using that word existing because remember, mold travels in and out. So after we do that first phase, mold still will come in and out. So the second phase, which we do the same day, we'll put an antimicrobial protectorant. So when new mold does come in and out, as it will, it can't land anyplace, which means it can't commingle, co-marriage, and it can't create what they call mold factories, which expel the mycotoxins, which creates the adversities for our bodies. The third step is we do testing. And remember, in California, it's not mandatory to test, but most of the companies, better companies, they always do post-tests. So make sure whomever you use, whether it's us or somebody else, they do a post-test. So we do a post-test. We take samples throughout that building. We send it to an unbiased third-party lab. And even if it passes California standards, if it doesn't pass our standards, we're going to do it again. So those are the 3 steps. And one more thing I just wanted to mention. Prior to our 3 steps, there's 3 steps we want to make sure is completed before we even start our 3 steps. And those 3 steps are, I kind of mentioned them earlier, all water intrusions must be finitely resolved, discovered and finitely resolved. Number 2, all areas must be dry. Again, they don't need to be 0% moisture, but they can't be like 50, 60, 80, 90% moisture level. And then, of course, the last thing is I mentioned there has to be adequate ventilation because that can create the same equation of the oxygen, food source, moisture at the right humidity. So that's pretty much what we do.
Raymond, this is really funny. I've just gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 text messages from listeners right now, all with the same question. Oh. How long do you have to be out of the house while you do the 3 steps?
You know what? That's another thing that people like it for. If it's under 4,000 square feet, we can do it within a day. All 3 steps within a day. I mean, the 2 steps for sure. The testing we might come back later to do, depending what the situation is. But they just need to be out of the house for a day. So you don't need to get a hotel room.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's
That is now. Can you smell mold?
Yeah, so smell is such a relative sense, isn't it? So all our inspectors, who are certified, by the way, they're trained not to give their viewpoint on the smells, especially because sense. It's a viewpoint. We don't know what they're smelling, and
right.
They don't know what I'm smelling. So a lot of times, clients will say to our inspectors, will say, "Do you smell that?" And they're trained to say, "Well, I smell something. I don't know what you're smelling, right?" So and I always tell, just to let you know, this is all in writing, but we do not guarantee getting rid of smells. But I will tell you this. Most smells are bacteria or fungus related, and, mold's a virus. And so most smells are bacteria or fungus related or virus related. Most smells like that. There's also animal smells, a dead animal, of course, but I'm just taking that out of the equation. So this process does kill those smells, right? So, but I always tell my guys, don't go out and say, "Hey, we're going to resolve your smells," even though a lot of times it does, So,
having mold in your house can make for a real health issue. And we're not trying to scare people, but they must know that that having mold in the house can really damage your health. Tell people about that.
Yeah, I've seen the dark side, as dark as you can get, and I, just can let your imagination go there. I've seen as bad as it can get. So, of course, I err on the side of I want to be more protecting. So, here's the problem with mold and why it's so elusive to so many people. It affects everybody differently. Now, I will tell you, about 14 years ago, there was a research, and they found out that 25% of people's DNA get very, very adversely affected to mold. 25%. Okay, so one out of four of us, they do not do well with mold. Now, along with that, another part of that whole equation is this. It also depends on each individual's history, immune system's history, how successful or unsuccessful it has been in defending itself against mold. Some people had some kind of incident that happened when they're a child maybe, and then it might lay dormant, because see, mold can go in your system. And then usually these mold doctors, and there are mold doctors, by the way, and you can also call my office, because a lot of these mold doctors, who we have not solicited, by the way, have found out what we've done, what we do, and they relay that information to their patients, and they refer the patients to us. But anyway, the reason I'm mentioning that to you is that when mold gets in your system, what these mold doctors do, they use charcoal and binders to pull it out of the system. But they always tell their patients, before we do this, you got to make sure your home environment is, safe from a problematic mold issue, any problematic high mold levels. And the ones who know about it say, don't get a regular mold company, because they're going to try to remove it by, removing walls and stuff. And that's not always, reliable. And again, I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. And just for the record, a lot of these mold companies are friends of mine. So, and if you had a candid conversation with them, they would tell you the exact same thing. So, but anyway.
So there's actually doctors out there that specialize in people who get sick from mold?
Absolutely. As society has moved forward, these doctors, and by the way, it's not true for all the doctors that have done it, but a lot of these doctors are DOs. So they're not just MDs. So DOs are doctors of osteopathy. Right. So these guys have 2 more years of training other than MDs. But a lot of them decided to specialize in mold because they discovered so much stuff is connected up to it. I don't want to say some of the things because it's just going to be sound like rumor, but there's so many things that connect up to mold, because mold's been part of our lives since time immemorial. It's been around forever. This one guy I met a long time, this real quick story, and this is like 5 years.
You love stories.
Yeah, he comes up to me and he says, I've had mold in my house for years and blah, 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 blah. And he says, mold's in the Bible. And I never heard of this. He goes, yeah, mold's in the Bible. So he reads this passage to me, and I don't know, and it says, this kind of pestilence in one shelter, this kind of pestilence in one shelter, you can't defend yourself. So basically you say you burn the house and walk away. So that's way back when. And the guy was telling me, he's not talking about locusts. He's talking about mold. Because they did not deal with mold. So mold's been around a long time. So mold has been problematic for a long time. We've been dealing with it differently. I really think, at the risk of sounding fanatical, I think most mold companies in the future, 10 to 20 years from now, will use some form of what we're using now to address mold, because it makes too much sense. It's too logical to, instead of removing the mold and then risk, many times, I won't say every time, 2 months, 5 months, 10 months later, that same client calls back and says, hey, the mold came back. And that's absolutely not true. The mold did not come back. The mold never fully left. So instead of trying to remove it by cutting it out, what we do is we kill the mold in the environment. So it's pretty thorough. We do the whole environment. We fog the whole thing. And then we take tests to make sure it's gone. So
Raymond, what is black mold?
Black mold is technically called Stachybotrys. So there's what they call marker molds in each state. Marker molds are these red flag molds. Stachybotrys is one of them. Stachybotrys is actually bad no matter what state you're in. So our marker molds in the state of California is Stachybotrys and Chaetomium. Chaetomium is equally as bad. That's CHAETOMIUM. Tomium, Chaetomium. And Stachybotrys is Stachybotrys. So Stachybotrys is the black mold. So again, mold comes in all kinds of different colors. My inspectors are trained not to freak people out and say, yeah, that's black mold, because it may or may not, but the labs will tell you biologically what it is, right? So it's better to know that way. Even though the guys might know just by being around it. So that's what black mold is. It's called Stachybotrys.
Do you have to send all your mold to a lab, Raymond?
Yeah, the samples we take after we do the protocol, the process, we send samples. We take samples throughout the house, throughout the apartment, throughout the commercial building, and we send them to a third-party lab. Because again, mold's really small. I mean, I can't tell you how many handymen or construction guys say, they tell the client, "Oh, your mold's taken care of. I wiped it down. I used bleach and I wiped it down."
I wouldn't trust that.
I couldn't. And how do you know the mold's gone? Trust me, I did it.
Yeah.
Trust no one. Run for the hills. Make sure they do it. Everybody should do a post test, and that's not just for me, but everybody. And in California, for some reason, it's not mandatory yet, but I'm sure it will be eventually. Being the green state that we are, I'm sure we'll figure it out. But like we started in Florida, it is mandatory to do post tests, and in most states, it is mandatory to do post tests. Because how do you really know if it's a bit habitable area, safe from mold?
Well, it seems like by the time you finally leave a person's house, they are pretty much guaranteed to be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we don't leave until that's true.
Tell me about dry fog.
Yeah. So, a lot of people say, what are the chemicals you use? Peracetic acid, all this different things, Sanidate, Mincare, all these different names are being thrown out. The truth of the matter is it's a product that's being used, but what really does the killing in the dry fog is what they call a phase change. Okay. Because when you fill up volumes and volumes of dense dry fog in a room, we let it sit there for 45 minutes up to an hour in each area because we want it to permeate and, engage in the whole area. So I mentioned to you, mold spores are 20 to 30 microns. That's how it gets in the nooks and crannies. That's how it goes in the wall plugs. Well, when this process, the denser and drier our fogging is, the first phase of it is, the smaller the particle becomes. So we keep it dense and dry for 45 minutes to up to an hour. My guys are just dropping a bomb and walking out. They're on hand, fogging it and keeping it dense and keeping it dry because, of course, fog can't stay existent how it is. So it becomes smaller particle. The denser and drier, the smaller the particle. It becomes 7.5 microns, much smaller than 20 or 30, which means any place a mold has gone, this is going to go, and it's going to kill. The other thing is how it works is this dry fog, Steve, is whether you want to call it engaging or evaporating or changing or whatever, we call it a phase change because it can't stay a dry fog forever. So we fill up with volumes of dry fog. When it does that phase change, where it does biologically on the mold molecule, it shatters the outer membrane of all mold molecules, mold spores.
Wow.
So it's, it can't colonize, it can't go mingle, and it can't expel mycotoxins. That's why it works. That's how that's the first phase. And the second phase just puts a fog antimicrobial protectorant. So when new mold comes in, it can't land any place, so it can't grow. It can't create mold factories. And then we test.
I've got a couple viewers. This is a viewer. Have you ever heard of bleach being effective against mold?
Yeah. So bleach, again, there's so many different types of mold, and bleach, maybe is effective for some mold, but to be honest with you, what bleach does? It bleaches.
It bleaches. So it doesn't really get rid of it.
Yeah, it has the appearance. So I've had people tell me, I threw bleach on it in the bathroom, and then it came back 3 weeks later even more. Right. So keep in mind, if whatever you're using, whether it's bleach or whatever you're using, if you don't kill it, if you don't really kill whatever mold spore it is, instead of it colonizing, it will do what they call sporulate, because mold is a living entity. It's going to defend itself. So if you didn't kill it, there's videos on it of mold growing from millions to billions in a short amount of time, because people put fans on it, people put bleach on it, people didn't kill it. So if you don't really finitely kill that thing and resolve it, it will defend itself and it'll start sporulating and just throwing it out and growing more. So bleach, I don't recommend bleach. I know it's on the internet, and so are a lot of other things, but I don't recommend bleach, so.
Here's a person, this is a pretty nice little message. They just text us, what a great show. My friend used your company.
Wow.
Oh, that's cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
Did you hear?
Yeah, that's, wow. Yeah, what a great show. My friend used your company. And how often will the show be on? Well, Raymond will be back with us again next month. But, Raymond, what I'm seeing is there's a lot to know about mold. And if you're a homeowner, if you're a business owner, if you have a condo, you could get mold. And if you don't get rid of it and get rid of it the right way, you're going to have some major health concerns.
Yes, it could be, what happens with mold is every time mold comes in and it's eating and procreating, I mentioned before, it's eating, procreating, spreading. They call it burping and farting, but it expels these things called mycotoxins. Every time it eats and procreates, it burps and farts mycotoxins. So those mycotoxins randomly float in the air. That specifically is what creates adversities in our bodies and in pets, right? Because it gives you brain fog, respiratory problems, ad infinitum, a lot of different stuff, headaches, tiredness, so, I get it all the time. People tell me, I think there's mold because, when I went on my a 2-week business trip, I felt great. Every time I come home, I have a headache and I can't breathe, and there's something wrong with the house. And I looked it up and it could be mold related. So it's really easy. You take a test to make sure there's mold so they feel like they're not just, it's just not, we're not just randomly doing it. And then we can go forward. Or if there's visible mold, I recommend don't take a test. There's mold, save your money. And then we'll just take care of it.
That's the best way. The name of the company is Mold Zero. Raymond, give everybody your phone number that's listening on radio.
Yes. Thank you, Steve. It's area code 626-671-8885. Again, that's 626-671-8885. And Christine's at the office. She's great. And she'll tell you.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's great.
Raymond, thank you so much. And for all the people who wrote in today, thank you. And yes, Raymond will be back again next month. I think they like your energy too, Raymond.
Oh, that's good. Well, you make it really safe, Steve. We appreciate it.
We love you, bro.
Okay, man.
And we'll be right back. Thank you.
K. Bender Rembaum is a full-service community association law firm dedicated to the representation of community associations throughout Florida. On KBRLegal.com, you can learn more about their offices in Pompano Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Orlando, Tampa, as well as throughout Miami-Dade by appointment. Several K. Bender Rembaum attorneys are board-certified specialists in condominium and plan development law and assist clients with all matters of community association legal issues while keeping them up to date on new developments that affect their associations. K. Bender Rembaum is also a well-known provider of free legal education for managers and board members. Contact K. Bender Rembaum today by calling 800-974-0680. That's 800-974-0680 to reach any of their locations. You can also visit them online at kbrlegal.com or write to them at info@kbrlegal.com.
And we are back with the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV with your hosts, Steve-O, Sophia, and their expert guests.
We're back. We were waiting for our next guest. They just wrote us. They have a flat tire and cannot make it today. Rebel, I'm so sorry. But we will be back with you next week with more Ask the Experts. And I want to thank you. I know our expert thanks you for tuning in today. And I'm sorry about the mix-up, but it's what happens when you have a live show. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you, Rebel. See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Ask the Expert show on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Tune in next week and every week to hear more from our experts on personal injury, insurance, air condition repairs, estate planning, Medicare, and many other topics in the areas of legal, health, financial, and home improvement. See you next week.